Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, so next installment. Somebody was asking me today whether I had lost my path on this sutta, because I was sort of, he felt that maybe I wasn't coming back to the gradual training again. But I assured him I will get back to the gradual training, and that is where I'm going to go right now. And of course the purpose of this big diversion is simply because the gradual training itself, sometimes it gives a very small amount of information about a particular topic. And if you want to flesh it out, you have to look in the suttas in the broader perspective. So this is basically the reason for this divergence. But now we're coming back to the gradual training, so we're back to the shorter discourse on the simile of the elephant's footprint, which is the third sutta in your list. Everybody got that? Yeah? Okay. Page 7, is it? I don't know. Yeah. Paragraph number 16 in that sutta. Yeah. Paragraph 16. So we're back on track again, back to the main discourse, which sort of forms the backbone of these sutta readings. So we are talking about, this is equivalent to right effort on the Noble Eightfold Path. We've just been looking at the paragraph on sense restraint. And now we're moving on to the next one. The next one is still on right effort. It's about how to apply yourself prior to meditation practice. And this particular passage is about full awareness. Sometimes it's called mindfulness and full awareness, sometimes just full awareness. And that in itself is actually quite an important point. Is this about mindfulness and full awareness, or is it just about full awareness? It's not completely irrelevant for the practice which one it actually means. Let me just read the passage first of all, and we can discuss these topics afterwards. So let me just read what this is about. So paragraph 16. He becomes one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking and keeping silent. So this is this passage on full awareness. And it may not be very clear what this means when you read it the first time. What does it mean to have full awareness about these things? But before I talk about that, if you have read this already, you may know that in the paragraph which comes after this one, it certainly talks about possessing noble mindfulness and full awareness, as if mindfulness actually has been spoken about in this passage. But there's nothing really here about mindfulness. The passage itself only talks about full awareness. So the question then is this imply mindfulness or does it not imply mindfulness? And this is not completely seem as irrelevant as it may seem, because in the Satipatthana Sutta, this particular passage is in the Satipatthana Sutta as well. So from that, you might conclude that this actually is about sati, because Satipatthana Sutta obviously is about sati and mindfulness, right? But the thing with the Satipatthana Sutta is that it is a very complex sutta, which looks like it has all these various factors put together into the Satipatthana Sutta. And it's not always very clear which aspects of that actually are the real or the original Satipatthana, and which things may have come into it at a later time. And again, the reason you can know this about the Satipatthana Sutta is that this particular sutta exists in a number of different versions. It exists in Chinese, for example. It exists in also in the Abhidhamma. There's Abhidhamma versions of this particular sutta. And there is also, I think, a couple of versions, 3 versions actually in Chinese. And when you look at all those different versions of the Satipatthana Sutta, you find that they actually differ quite considerably here. There's different factors in there, different exercises have been added in here. And because of all that variation in the different versions, it is reasonable to think that this sutta has kind of accumulated material into it over a fairly substantial amount of time, maybe a few hundred years after the Buddha, after the different schools of Buddhism went their separate ways. And because of that, one has to be a little bit careful with using the Satipatthana Sutta to interpret other aspects of the Dhamma. It should really be the other way around. One should use the other aspects of Dhamma first, and then the Satipatthana Sutta afterwards, because it's known to be a fairly composite sutta. So what does this mean then? So the first thing then to be aware of is that this talks about full awareness, sampajanya in Pali. This is what the passage itself talks about. And there is also a very interesting passage in the Satipatthana Samyutta. This Satipatthana Samyutta is all the discourses about Satipatthana. You find that in the Samyutta Nikaya. And in there, a distinction is made specifically between sati and sampajanya. And on the one hand, sampajanya is defined just as here, just as in this paragraph. On the other hand, sati is specifically defined as the 4 satipatthanas. So from that passage alone, it would seem that sampajanya is one thing, sati is something else. These are 2 distinct things. And sampajanya belongs to the gradual training. At this point, sati comes later on in the gradual training. Sati has to do with meditation practice. Sampajanya is more a preliminary thing that you do prior to meditation. And you find throughout the suttas that meditation is done usually in the sitting posture. Whereas this sampajanya concerns all kind of activities. That's not normally when you do meditation according to the suttas. So this does not mean that sampajanya and sati are completely separate things, of course not. To be able to have sampajanya, you need a certain measure of sati. The point is just that the sati that is required for real meditation is a more advanced stage of sati than the sati you have at this particular point. That's really the only point I'm trying to make. So I may have lost many of you with that discussion, and I apologize if I have, but I know that there are many people here who are very keen on the suttas, who I'm sure would have understood what I was talking about. So don't be too concerned about that. The point is basically this is a part of the gradual training which concerns this thing we call full awareness. So what does full awareness mean? Or sometimes called clear comprehension. Now, a good place to start to understand what this means is to actually start in the commentaries, because this is defined in the commentaries. One reason I use the commentaries in this case is because it seems that their definition is quite useful. And the commentaries talk about there's 4 aspects to sampajanya. There's called purpose, suitability, resort, and non-delusion. These are the 4 aspects of sampajanya. And of these 4 aspects, I think the 2 first ones are by far the most important. Purpose. So, if you look at that list I've just been reading out, why the purpose is we are doing all of these things for a particular reason. And we are aware of the reason why we're doing it, right? Because then if we are aware of the reason, we have a sense of direction in our practice. So, for example, if you are going out somewhere, going forward and returning, there is a reason why you're going forward. And a classical reason in the suttas, or for a Buddhist monk, we're talking mostly about monastics now, for going forward would be to go to the village for alms, right? You're going forward to the village and then you return on the way back. So you're aware of the purpose. The purpose here is to go for alms. It's not any other purpose. And when you keep that in mind, that is then exactly what you do when you go to the village. You don't get sidetracked by doing other things, by looking at all the interesting sights or whatever, but you go for alms, and that is what you do. So you have the purpose in mind. And the point of this is that we try always, as Buddhist monastics, but also as Buddhist lay people, we try to align what we do with the purpose of the Dhamma, right? We try to align it with the Dhamma, essentially. So that is why it is so useful to keep the purpose in mind, so we know what we're doing, why we're doing it. And the second thing, which is suitability, is very closely related to that. We may be doing something for the right purpose, but maybe it's not the suitable time or the right time to do that particular activity here. So you go, for example, meditation is always right, but perhaps you need to decide whether you're going to sit or walk. So what is your mind state like? So you do the suitable activity for that particular time. I think in the Visuddhimagga there's loads of examples about how to do the suitable thing. And they say, you go to a shrine or to a chaitya, to a stupa, right? And sometimes it's nice to go to the stupa because that's what monks do sometimes, but not at the time when there's lots of people there, for example. It's the unsuitable time. So purpose and suitability have to go hand in hand. You know why you're doing it, and you know that it's suitable to bring you forward on the path. These are the two aspects of sampajanya. So you can now see why this is called clear comprehension, right? You have a clear idea in your mind about why you're doing these things. It's not so much about being mindful all the time, it's more about having this sense of clarity about why you're doing it. Then the two last aspects of sampajanya are resort and non-delusion. And these are more, the first one about resort basically means that you're supposed to keep your meditation object in mind while you're doing these things. And I am not sure if that necessarily is the right way of doing it. There is no reference in the suttas for keeping your meditation object in mind while you go to the village, while you eat, while you do all these things. Maybe it is right for certain people, but I don't think there is any solid basis in the suttas for saying that. So in that case, I don't have any, I can't find any strong support in the suttas for the commentaries' opinions. In that case, I tend to sort of be a little bit skeptical myself. And the last one, non-delusion, is this idea that you are not deluded about these activities. You don't see a self in there. It's not a self going to the village and going back. And again, although that of course is an ideal state of affairs, that you're not deluded about these things, we are still very early on in the path. And for me, this is a very profound practice when you have non-delusion to that extent. So I'm also a little bit skeptical about that commentarial interpretation. Again, these are my personal opinions, so please don't, this is just what I'm saying. But the two first ones about suitability and purpose, certainly I think they are very are spot on for what this is about. And we will see that later on as well when we look at some other passages in the suttas about clear comprehension. So, the next thing then, what are all these activities about? And if we look at these activities that we're talking about here, talking about going forward, returning, looking ahead, looking away, flexing the limbs, etc., wearing the robes, right, carrying the robe and the bowl, eating and drinking, etc., these seem to be specifically the activities that a monastic does when he or she goes on alms round, right? You go for alms round, that's when you do these particular things. And more broadly, all the activities mentioned here seem to be the sort of activities that you do when you're not doing formal meditation practice. You're not sitting down, you're not doing walking meditation, you're doing something else, because it is also required to do other things, right? All of these things are required in life. So this is how you should act as a monastic. It is applicable for lay people as well, but specifically for a monastic, when you're not sitting in meditation. So you have a clear awareness of what you're doing, why you're doing these things. And I think many of these things are then fairly obvious. It's about, going on alms round, wearing the robes, carrying the robe and bowl. You know what you're doing, you know the purpose for this, the suitability. while eating, drinking and consuming food. You know the purpose. In other words, you eat to sustain the body. You don't eat too much. You have clear awareness for why you're eating. So you do it in a suitable way, right? You have clear awareness when attending to the calls of nature. And you have clear awareness when you do any kind of other activities, walking, standing, sitting. It says here, falling asleep. Now the Pali here actually is sutte, which means asleep. That's what it actually means. It doesn't mean falling asleep, it means while sleeping. That's what it means. The other one, waking up again, it doesn't mean waking up. Jagariya means when you are awake, being awake. And then talking and keeping silent. Now I just want to comment a little bit on that last point there, because often people say, how can you have mindfulness while you're sleeping? How can sutta means asleep? How is that possible? And of course the point is, I've just made this whole point about it doesn't mean mindfulness at all. It means clear comprehension. So it's not really about being mindful while you are sleeping, it's about having clear comprehension in regard to sleep, concerning being asleep, and concerning being awake. So what this is about then, I would say, and other people say this as well, is it concerns knowing the right amount of sleep, for example. You have clear comprehension about the purpose of sleeping and the suitability, so that you have the right kind of quality of mind when you're finished with that sleep. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little, that sort of thing here. That's what this really is about. Clear comprehension about sleeping here. And also about talking, right? This is an important one. You talk, there's a certain purpose to why you talk. There's a certain kind of reason for talking here. It's not just talking for talking's sake. So there is a purpose behind that. Sometimes that purpose can be just to be friendly. It doesn't mean that we have to be silent all the time, but sometimes it means that we avoid the kind of worst of the idle and unproductive chatter in life. So that is the paragraph on clear comprehension or full awareness, knowing what you are doing basically here. And now what I want to do now, I want to have a look at another passage in the suttas which talks about this in a bit more detail here. And to find that passage, you have to go to Majjhima Nikaya number 2. There's the 10th passage in that little booklet you have. So if you can sort of move forward to the 10th passage. Sabhasava Sutta. Yeah, Sabhasava Sutta. Page 17 says Ajahn Brahmali. Yeah. So page 17. Okay, so this is the well-known Sabhasava Sutta, which literally means something like all the problems or all the corruptions or something like that. It's all the asavas basically here. So this sutta is about how to restrain all the problems. Asavas can be translated in many different ways. There isn't really any kind of final translation, but it means like problems, or it says taints. I think taints is a bit weak, but corruptions or defilements, basically, that's what it ultimately comes down to here. So this sutta is about that, and you will see there in paragraph 12, if you have it in front of you, there is a passage which looks very, very similar to the passage we saw before about sense restraint. It's almost exactly the same. And then if you move down the page, then there is a number of paragraphs on various kind of things. And then we come down to paragraph 20. And paragraph 20 is taints to be abandoned by removing. So this is the abandoning of the hindrances. And this is what happens just before you attain samadhi. So all the passages in between there are basically in the same place as where the gradual training has clear comprehension. So because they are in the same place, you can take it that the paragraphs here called taints to be abandoned by using, taints to be abandoned by enduring, taints to be abandoned by avoiding, are a type of clear comprehension. So this is like, if you like, a detailed exposition of clear comprehension or full awareness. That's why I have turned to this sutta. So it's the position here, the position between the other factors, that tells you roughly that it must be pretty much equivalent to clear comprehension. But before I move on to that, I want to have a quick look at the formula for sense restraint. So if you go back to paragraph 12 again, and I just want to point out one small but I think interesting point in the formula for sense restraint here. If you remember back, I was talking about sense restraint, and I was saying that sense restraint is not so much about using willpower and forcing yourself not to, to kind of push away the bad states and forcing yourself to look away and using willpower in various ways. That is not the main importance of sense restraint. The main thing about sense restraint, I was arguing, is about using wisdom, knowing that if you look in a certain place, it will give rise to unwholesome qualities, right? So use the wisdom to understand that this is where suffering is, so you don't actually look there or you look at it in a different way. This is how sense restraint comes about. And so I was arguing it's about wisdom. Now, if you read this particular paragraph here, you will see that it says what taints should be abandoned by restraining, and then it says here, a bhikkhu reflecting wisely abides with the eye faculty restraint, while taints, vexation and fever might arise in one who abides with the eye faculty unrestrained. There are no taints, vexation or fever in one who abides with the eye faculty restrained. And then the same for the other 6 senses. So here you can see that reflecting wisely is actually part and parcel of sense restraint, as I was mentioning before. So again, you can see how the suttas come together, right? All the various strands get pulled together once you see how it all connects up. That is always nice. It gives you a sense of confidence that you have understood the sutta correctly when it all ties together very nicely. So then, having done the sense restraint, then we come to the clear comprehension in paragraph 13. And these are then the taints or the fevers to be abandoned by using. This is the first one. And this is a standard paragraph in the suttas, and I'll just read it out. So this is what the Buddha says. What corruptions or defilements, bhikkhus, should be abandoned by using? Here, a bhikkhu, reflecting wisely, uses the robe only for protection from cold, for protection from heat, for protection from contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, and creeping things, and only for the purpose of concealing the private parts. So that is the reason for using a robe, right? This is the reason. And as it says there, it's only for that reason. Only is the important word in there. It's not for anything else. So the purpose is you need a robe, for protecting yourself essentially from the elements, from the mosquitoes, from the gadflies. I have no idea what a gadfly is, but I guess it's probably not very pleasant. Probably some kind of maybe stinging fly or something like that. So it is for protection. It is not for anything else. And this is an important point, because what you notice, and I'm going to talk about monastic life first. In lay life it's even worse. But in monastic life, sometimes the robes become something which is much more than just for protecting yourself. The robe becomes something that people want to have a certain quality, they want to have a certain color, they want to have a certain... Sometimes there is trends in monastic requisites. You have a certain trend perhaps in robes, and everybody has to have the same kind of robe and these kind of things. But the point is, that is not the purpose of a robe. The purpose of a robe is just these things here. And it's important to keep that in mind, because this particular purpose, if you look at all of these things, these are kind of unpleasant qualities in the world, right? So the purpose of the robe is to protect you from the unpleasant things, so that your body can be at ease, it can be relaxed, it can be ready for meditation practice. Just as we are talking about the ease of the body in meditation, this is exactly what we're talking about here as well. But if you go to the other extreme and you start having desire in robes, then again, it is no longer the ease, then a kind of craving arises. So first of all, you have the, there's two possibilities. Either you don't have a robe and you feel all this pain and displeasure because of that, or you have a robe and you feel craving for it. In either case, you have gone astray. You have gone to either one of the extremes, essentially. But the middle path robe is the robe which does not give rise to craving, but it is useful for dispelling the negative feelings, right? The bad feelings. That is the purpose of a robe. And in monastic life, it's not so bad. Many monks use the robes in the right way. But if you think about lay life, it's much worse, right? In lay life, clothing is, to some extent, you are what you wear, right? You are showing off your personality by what you wear. These are the kind of clothes I wear, and then, this is very, very much part of who we consider ourselves to be. So again, it's nice, one thing about coming on a retreat like this, everybody wears white. Isn't that wonderful? You don't have to be anybody anymore. You can sort of relax. You can allow all that kind of me, myself, and I to sort of fade into the background a little bit. So even in lay life, we can think a little bit like that. Why all this status all the time? This idea is about being somebody. How nice it is just to use the clothes, just to protect yourself in this way and nothing more. So it's just a way of reducing the sense of self a bit. And it's always good to reduce the sense of self, because the more sense of self you have, generally speaking, the more suffering you also have, and the more difficult it is to enter meditation. So this is, you can see how this works, I'm sure. So then a parallel kind of method applies for also the other requisites here, so that we're going to move from requisite to requisite. The next one, actually, again, I should also point out that throughout this sutta, you have this refrain about reflecting wisely here. So always reflecting wisely, understanding where suffering lies, understanding where happiness lies, right? So if you understand happiness and suffering, you find that way which leads to the least problems. Reflecting wisely, he uses alms food, neither for amusement nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate the old feelings without arousing new feelings, and I shall be healthy and blameless, and I shall live in comfort. So again, using food is about being comfortable. So you use food in such a way that you feel just right. It's not to be used for indulging, whereby food becomes an obsession, nor is it to use so little that you don't actually feel at ease, you feel relaxed in life. It's that middle way again, neither one nor the other. So you don't overeat, right? We all know what it's like when you overeat. You feel really drowsy afterwards. It's very difficult to do the meditation practice or whatever. And that is what is meant here by not creating new feelings. That's the feelings from overeating here. So you terminate the feelings of hunger and you don't create bad new feelings from overeating here. So again, it's the middle way in between. Neither the excessive craving for the food, nor the kind of the tormenting of the body where you have too little food. The middle way here, you can be at ease, you can be relaxed. Pasu is the Pali word for living in comfort here. Pasu viharati. On a small point, which has perhaps a little bit of interest, it says here that you don't use food for the sake of attractiveness, which may seem a little bit strange. Again, in the Chinese version of this sutta, that word attractiveness is actually comes, and physical beauty as well, I think, come under the previous one, robes rather than under food, where it possibly it fits better here. Just to give you some idea of the slight variations you can find between the different recensions of these suttas. Okay, next one. Reflecting wisely, he uses the resting place only for protection from cold, for the protection from heat, for protection from contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, and creeping things, and only for the purpose of warding off the perils of climate and for enjoying retreat. Enjoying retreat is retreat here is pati salana, which means like withdrawing and basically retreat. So again, you see here that the place you live should be simple as a monastic, right? It should be something that is just enough so you can be comfortable. Not indulgent, but also not so poor that you can't feel comfortable there. That middle way again. And again, sometimes you can see that in many places you find that monastics go overboard because they get so much support sometimes. I don't know what it's like here in Sri Lanka, but I know that in places like Thailand, sometimes you get overwhelmed by support. Particularly if you are a monk of a certain tradition, you're considered a forest monk or something, and you're considered somebody who there's lots of merit to offer to this monk, then people don't know moderation, and over the kind of the amount of donations you get is absolutely out of all proportions for what you need. And sometimes, unfortunately, what happens because a good monastery where people are practicing well gets spoiled and gets corrupted because of too much generosity. So it's good for the lay community when you support the monastics to find that middle way, of course, to ask what is required, what is needed, but not to kind of help the destruction of Buddhism, if you know what I mean. There comes a point when if you help support people building these luxury kutis or luxury houses, then you're no longer supporting Buddhism, you're actually helping in its downfall. Please keep that in mind. There is always that middle way. It's wonderful to support, it's wonderful to be generous, but find out where the generosity is required, and don't be one of those people who actually is just seeking for merit, and actually you're not making much merit anyway because you're helping the downfall rather than building it up. And sometimes when you see some of these, I have been to some places where it's just outrageous, the kind of buildings that sometimes are being built because neither the lay people nor the monk knows moderation in what is appropriate. I stayed in Malaysia a while ago, and there was a monk there who was building this. I came there to stay there for the night, and he gave me this enormous room with like a massive double bed, and everything was marble and gold everywhere. It looked like this very, very a luxurious hotel room. That's what it looked like. It looked nothing at all like a kuti. And he said, do you like it? I didn't know. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to be impolite, right? What can you say in that situation? And I didn't say anything. I just I took his offer and I slept there for the night. And then later on, I asked the lay people, what is going on here? What is he doing? And he was still constructing more and more, right? Building up this enormous thing. And I asked the lay people, what's going on here? What is he aiming for? And they said, we don't really understand ourselves, but we are too shy. We are too shy to ask any questions. And this is sometimes that is the problem, that many traditional Buddhist countries, lay people are too shy. They don't dare to ask. They don't dare to say, enough is enough. Now it's time to, we need to do something different. So keep that in mind, because merit in Buddhism, generosity, is about giving where it is required. It's not about giving kind of completely without any limits or bounds whatsoever. That's actually in the suttas, although it is not often pointed out. Okay, so there you are. That is on the resting place that is suitable. And of course, again, you can also take this into lay life as well, to be content with what you have, right? Not always to look for something more luxurious or something better. It is natural to some extent that we want that, but sometimes life is much easier when we have contentment. If you have contentment, you have more peace. You have more peace, your meditation is better. And in many ways, I think your life becomes better that way, than always craving for more. Okay, so then we have the last one, reflecting wisely. He uses the medicinal requisites only for protection from arisen, afflicting feelings and for the benefit of good health. So again, it's that middle way with medicinal requisites. While corruptions, vexation and fever might arise in one who does not use the requisites thus, there are no corruptions, vexation or fever in one who uses them thus. These are called the taints or the corruptions that should be abandoned by using. So here you get some idea then what clear comprehension is. You have clear comprehension about how you use the requisites. You use them without giving rise to more unwholesome states. Neither do you have the unwholesome states of torturing yourself, nor do you have the unwholesome states of giving rise to craving. The middle way, clear comprehension in this regard. And the beautiful thing about this, it makes it very simple what clear comprehension means. Sometimes it can be explained in very complicated ways, but this is a very simple way to understand and very useful, very practical, very straightforward. Okay, next one, taints to be abandoned by enduring. What taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by enduring? Here a bhikkhu, reflecting wisely, bears cold and heat, hunger and thirst, and contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, and creeping things. He endures ill-spoken, unwelcome words, and arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. While taints, vexation, and fever might arise in one who does not endure such things, there are no taints and vexation or fever in one who does endure them. These are called the corruptions that should be abandoned by enduring. So this is just the understanding that in life sometimes there is no way around things, right? Sometimes you have to endure. Sometimes you cannot avoid things. And when you cannot avoid them, well, enduring is the only solution. And of course, things like nature, sometimes we cannot control nature. We cannot always control the temperature. We cannot always control the insects. We cannot, particularly if you're living the life of a good Buddhist, there are limits to what you can do about these things. So you accept, okay, this is the way it is. I can't do it. And when you accept that this is the way the world is, you can't do anything about it, then you are able to endure. Because you know there's nothing you can do anyway, so I will endure instead. And then endurance becomes possible. Then patience becomes possible. And of course, the next one here is a very common problem, and it's interesting that it actually is specifically pointed out in this sutta. And this is the problem of ill-spoken and unwelcome words, right? This is one of those other things, as I mentioned the other day, that very often we cannot do anything about. We live in a world where it is so common, it's so often we hear things we don't really want to hear. And again, it's nothing you can do anything about. You cannot change the world, you cannot change these things. So then you recognize, I can't do anything, okay, so I will endure. Once you recognize that there's nothing you can do, that is that point, endurance becomes possible. At that point, patience, khanti, becomes possible. And then you have the last one, the obviously also important one, and that is to do with the physical body. The physical body will sometimes be painful. Sometimes you will get ill. Sometimes you will get, as it says here, feelings, menacing to life. You might almost be dying, whatever. And sometimes you cannot do anything. Of course, there's nothing wrong with seeing the doctor. There's nothing wrong with taking the right medicines. There's nothing wrong with going to hospital. But in the end, sometimes we cannot do anything here. This is just the nature of this body here. And then, again, you endure rather than do something else, getting craving, getting upset, getting angry, or whatever. It's not going to help, so you endure instead. So this is just about, again, reflecting wisely on life. When you can't do it, when you can't do anything, you don't do anything, you endure. But when you can do something, that is when you do something. Then we have the last one of these things about clear comprehension. So all of this is about understanding, right? Clear comprehension, understanding how the world functions, basically. And these are the taints to be abandoned by avoiding. And what taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by avoiding? Here a bhikkhu, again reflecting wisely, avoids a wild elephant, a wild horse, a wild bull, a wild dog, a snake, a stump, a bramble patch, a chasm, a cliff, a cesspit, a sewer. Reflecting wisely, he avoids sitting on unsuitable seats, wandering to unsuitable resorts, and associating with bad friends. Since, if he were to do so, wise companions in the holy life might suspect him of evil conduct or bad conduct. While corruptions, vexation, and fever might arise in one who does not avoid these things, there are no corruptions, vexations, and fever in one who does avoid them. These are called the corruptions that should be abandoned by avoiding him. So it is a bit funny, isn't it, that you should avoid a wild elephant and a wild horse. It seems kind of perhaps obvious, but what it means is that, you place your kuti. If you're building a kuti for yourself, you build it in such a place where you're not kind of, with these things aren't so much of a problem, right? You don't build it too far into the wilderness, nor too close to the village. You find the kind of the middle way here, where it is reasonably safe. You don't put yourself in harm's way, as they say here. And again, all of these things are obviously things that you just should avoid. Cliffs and a cesspit and a sewer. So you should avoid the cesspit and the sewer. Sometimes these have a kind of cultural context, and sometimes it's difficult for us perhaps to understand. But it seems fairly obvious that you should avoid those things. But then comes perhaps the more interesting ones. You should avoid sitting on unsuitable seats, right? We are here talking probably about monastic practice, because an unsuitable seat for a monk, the classical example, and this is what the commentary I think means in this particular case, is to be like alone with a woman, right? This would be a classical example of an unsuitable seat for a monastic. And there's many reasons why it's an unsuitable seat, but one of them is also it just doesn't look very good. It looks like, there's a couple sitting there basically here. Then you have wandering to unsuitable resorts. So what does that mean? It means basically you can imagine an unsuitable resort for a monk would be kind of hanging around in a nightlife area, right? Or going to the casino perhaps. There's all kind of dodgy places where obviously a monk should not be or a nun should not be. And again, these are unsuitable resorts. And remember, the idea behind this, we're talking about right effort here. The point is to avoid the arising of unwholesome states, right? Arising of defilements, either anger or desire. So it's pretty clear when you think about you want to avoid anger and desire, it becomes pretty clear what the unsuitable resorts are. It isn't that hard to figure it out. So then associating with bad friends is the same kind of thing. If you associate with people that are unscrupulous, with bandits and robbers or criminals or whatever, it doesn't look very good for a monastic to hang out with those people, because it tends to rub off a little bit, right? You get a little bit of the reputation of the criminal if you hang out with criminals. That's why good people normally don't hang out with criminals, because it doesn't seem right. And then it says here, since if he were to do so, wise companions in the holy life might suspect him of evil conduct. Does that sound right? It doesn't sound right to me when I read that, because what that means is that you don't do these things because others might suspect you of evil conduct. But that is not a very noble reason. If you think that nobody would suspect anything, is it then okay to do it? Of course not. That's not the point. And it's actually a mistranslation of the Pali. And what it actually means is that if your companions, in particular the Buddha, would say that this is an unsuitable place, then you shouldn't go there. That is actually what it means. So it's not, you don't do it because others might suspect you. You don't do it because it's generally agreed among wise people that it is an unsuitable place. That is why you don't go there. So, these are the things to be avoided. And again, you can see that it is a similar thing in lay life, right? What are the places you should avoid as a lay person? And again, it fits in very easily. If you are a person who keeps the 5 precepts and you don't want to drink alcohol, it is not wise to hang around in bars or in pubs, right? If you do that, it is sometimes very difficult to avoid drinking. So if all your friends go to the pub and you go with them, the chances are that you will also have a drink eventually. So if you are really really serious about the practice of the 5 precepts, then you try to avoid going to places where you know the temptation will be so strong that it's hard to resist it. And this is an important principle in life, to actually avoid temptations. It's difficult enough as it is, right, to practice this path. It's difficult enough to avoid defilements as it is. We don't need to tempt ourselves. We don't need to test our resolve. What we need, rather, is to be wise about how to avoid the arising of these defiled states. And there is some very interesting scientific research that has been done on human willpower, and it shows that human willpower is incredibly weak. It is really, really weak. We give into temptations all the time, basically. That is what this research says. So whenever we think that we are going to be like on a diet or something, people can't do diets. They always kind of break their diet, right? And as soon as the diet is finished, they kind of binge on food again and they're back where they started. It's a classical case. You know, people go on a diet and they lose weight, and then soon afterwards they go up again, and it's kind of this curve goes like this. This is a kind of classical diet problem, up and down all the time. We don't have willpower. Willpower doesn't work. It has been basically shown scientifically that it just doesn't work. So what is the solution? And what these researchers found, that those people who seemed as if they had willpower, what they did, they used wisdom instead. And they didn't put themselves in a situation where the willpower had to be tested. Those were the people who were successful. So, for example, one of the things they tested on this particular thing was somebody, I think they were walking past a shop window or something, and there were some nice cakes there for sale, very cheap or whatever. And then the person who thought they were going to restrain themselves with willpower, they would just look at all the nice goodies, but they were going to say no, right? But the person who used wisdom wouldn't even look at the shop window. Which one do you think was successful most of the time? The successful one was the one who didn't look, right? Because they understood that if I tempt myself, it will be too late. I'm going to indulge. I'm going to lose my control. My willpower isn't strong enough. So this is a very interesting point to keep in mind. Be wise about these things. Don't think that you have the will to be able to resist, because probably you don't. So then that wisdom power becomes very, very useful. So this idea of avoiding is then very useful, both for monastics and also for lay people alike. So there you are. I think again this is a very practical passage here. It shows you how, in my opinion, how clear comprehension can be used in a very practical and direct way. It is not just some kind of intellectual idea, it is a very practical thing. And then this is how to think clearly about how to avoid getting yourself into difficulties. That's essentially what it is about. So that is about clear comprehension, and the next passage here in this particular sutta is about removing the defilements, and this is very similar to a passage in the Gradual Training, which we will come to later on, so I won't get into that now. But maybe for the last few minutes, there is another sutta in here, which is quite nice, that talks about using effort and energy. Let's see if we can find that sutta. It's the sutta after the Gradual Training, called the 10 Powers. Now I'm going to take out one of these newfangled devices that somebody was talking about the other day. They were talking about the dangers of electronic devices. So here is one of those dangers right here. So this is a Kindle, and this has, here I have the Tipitaka in Pali and in English and everything else. Very handy. So, okay, I'm going to read it from here because I want to add a few things that I forgot to add in this one here. So not the whole, not everything that I'm going to read is actually going to be in here, and it's also a slightly different translation, so you won't be able to follow it word for word. But this is how it goes, this 10 power sutta. And the first part I'm going to leave out, and then the Buddha says the following. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me. And this well expounded goes back to dependent origination. That is what he's referring to here. has been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork. When bhikkhus, the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork, this is enough for a clansman who has gone forth out of faith to arouse his energy thus. Willingly let only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and let the flesh and blood dry up in my body. But I will not relax my energy so long as I have not attained what can be attained by manly strength, by manly energy, by manly exertion. Bhikkhus, the lazy person dwells in suffering, soiled by evil or bad, unwholesome states, and great is the personal good that he neglects. But the energetic person dwells happily, secluded from bad, unwholesome states, and great is the personal good that he achieves. It is not by the inferior that the supreme is attained. Rather, it is by the supreme that the supreme is attained. Bhikkhus, this holy life is a beverage of cream. The teacher is present. Therefore, bhikkhus, arouse your energy for the attainment of the as yet unattained, for the achievement of the as yet unachieved, for the realization of the as yet realized, with the thought, in such a way, this going forth of ours will not be barren, but fruitful and fertile. And when we use the robes, the alms food, the lodgings and medicinal requisites offered to us by others, these services they provide for us will be of great fruit and great benefit to them. Thus, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves. Considering your own good bhikkhus, it is enough to strive for the goal with heedfulness. Considering the good of others, it is enough to strive for the goal with heedfulness. Considering the good of both, it is enough to strive for the goal with heedfulness. So, that is, I don't know, I like that sutta. It's very kind of, it tells you to strive, to get on with the act, to use your effort, to get in there, get rid of the defilements, to develop the good states, because the Dhamma is here. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beverage of cream, it says here, the Dhamma. It sounds a bit strange, right? Beverage of cream. But remember, cream in the Pali language and cream in English, I don't know what it is in Sinhala, but cream is like the best of something, right? You talk about the cream of the cream. It's the best of something. It's exactly the same in the Pali language. The cream is the best. So when you practice the Dhamma, it's like you are drinking in the qualities of the Dhamma. You're taking them on board. It's a beverage of cream. You're getting the very best. The teacher is in your presence. Well, the teacher is not here in the sense that the Buddha is not here, but we still have the Dhamma. So, in a sense, the teacher is still here. There comes a time when even the Dhamma will no longer be here, right? This is the time. This is the time when we have the beverage of cream, because the Dhamma is still here. And that is why we should arouse the energy now for attaining these things. Now is the opportunity. You don't know when the opportunity will come again next time. Now you can hear the Dhamma. Now you are in a position to do something about it, to practice it the right way. What a wonderful situation you're in. Don't waste the opportunity. That is what he is saying here. So, and very fascinating here, I think this is an important point as well. The lazy person dwells in suffering, right? In Buddhism. If you're lazy, that is when you dwell in suffering. What does it mean to be lazy? That you are soiled by bad, unwholesome qualities. In other words, you're not doing anything about the bad qualities in yourself. You're not exerting yourself to abandon them. You're allowing yourself to be soiled by these things. Again, remember the idea of the soil remover. Gold is soiled by defilements, right? In the same way, we are soiled by defilements in the mind. Take away the soiling things, and the purity, the pure, beautiful mind comes out. So you are soiled if you have defilements. And so put forth that energy, and when you put forth the energy to abandon these things, that is part of happiness in Buddhism. Then you feel happy. That putting forth of energy itself is a degree of happiness. That is what the Buddha is saying here. The energetic person dwells happily because he is secluded from the bad, unwholesome qualities. And great is the personal good that he achieves. The bad person, the lazy one, great is the personal good that he neglects. In other words, there is so much happiness to be attained through this practice, unimaginable amounts of happiness, and there is unimaginable amounts of suffering to be had if you neglect it, right? These are the two sides of the coin. So this is like the Buddha saying, get on with it. There's something important here. There's something really, really worthwhile. And of course, interesting here, further down for the monastics, it is the case that if you practice well, anybody practices well. If you practice well and you actually achieve something in monastic life, if you achieve something in lay life, then whoever supports you, whoever provides you with requisites, they get enormous merit for supporting someone who's practicing well. So out of compassion for others, the better you practice, the more you are actually supporting others in doing good karma, in making a refuge for themselves. So you are practicing both for yourself and for others just by doing your meditation practice, just by striving to overcome bad states, just by achieving wisdom for yourself. That is enough, and you're already doing heaps of good. So that is then the reason for putting forth effort, because you are producing enormous amounts of happiness in the world, for yourself and also for other people. So I just thought that sutta was very nice, a very kind of uplifting sutta, and that's why I read it out. And because we have been talking about right effort, right striving, it sort of fits very beautifully in that picture. There is a cause for this striving, there's a reason, and this is the reason. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for today. Yeah, I think it's close enough, only 2 minutes before time. And then tomorrow morning we can continue. Actually, first of all, we have the meditation and the Q&A afterwards. So let us pay our respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha together here.